Hey, Scott from aristocob.com here.
And Seth from theshrinkingpastor.com.
Together, the three of us, we are Mark Men's Breakfast Club. Thanks for joining us. Good morning, boy.
Good morning, Homer.
So,
what are we smoking?
the same.
Oh.
In the same pipes.
Being mystery tobacco.
I'm pretty sure that's BCA. It tastes to me like BCA.
Yeah, it's very aromatic.
BCA is not very aromatic.
Well,
It's got some vanilla in it.
yeah.
It's a black Cavendish aromatic BCA.
Yeah, it's definitely aromatic.
It's good. Yeah, this is the stuff that, remember they came out with the dark cherry tobacco back at Taps? That is casing added to this tobacco.
Okay.
Anyway, when we wrapped up last week, and this is still this week, which was last week, talking about me having to go out of town, and it's just a tough time of year for me, very, very busy. So we're recording another episode here. As we were wrapping up, I asked Boy about what he was doing in Phoenix, and he said, well, let's talk about that next week. So it's next week. What were you doing in Phoenix? I know you talked about it in the episode that you were soloing, but what was that about?
So I mentioned 2 months ago I transitioned companies from a service manager at a plumbing company where I was managing plumbing technicians that you would call up if you've got a clogged something in your house and need to have it cleaned, or if you need to have your basement repiped or water heater replaced, and transitioned to a new job where we manufacture and sell grease interceptors. It's a very interesting career change because when I got the plumbing job, it just was happenstance, and it has allowed me to get this other job that is still in an industry I never imagined myself being a part of. But
when you were in seminary, you weren't thinking,
was not.
man,
No.
I can't wait to get out of this and sell grease traps.
Working in a high school, never thought about that either. And so I had that thought, and were very reflective on the last 2 years in the plumbing company as I was on this trip in Phoenix, because we traveled to Phoenix for the American Society of Plumbing Engineers convention. They hold it once every 2 years. There are localized chapters all throughout the United States of plumbing engineers and architects that will meet up. They'll talk best practices. They'll have continuing education credits for their license.
This is really different than the last show you did,
Yes. Yep. So I think I mentioned in my video in the hotel room that our company, my position within the company, I've been hired on as a business development manager, and the manager part is not applicable yet, but they want me to create a division within the company that will hire out 3 to 8 to however many is necessary staff that will be involved in doing some forms of market research, so talking to our customers directly and finding out what their needs are. Some forms of trend finding, so understanding where things are going, what cities are in need of our products, and then an awful lot of training and education, creating continuing education credits for engineers, for instance, or creating videos, doing webinars. And so it's a very interesting position because we're kind of making it up as we go along. It's
Sure, that's what business development's all about.
Yeah, and not only figuring out what's going to work for our company, but also just the position itself. Because what has been very outwardly expressed is that this is not another way of it's not just a different name put onto a sales position. So their intention and the intention with this is not to close sales today. It's to create value for our customers that we understand and believe will create sales in the future. So what I'm doing now may turn into a sale 2 years from now, but it's not my job to close the deal, which is nice because it allows for me to have less pretext in
It's a different
honest
relationship
communication
with the customer.
That's right.
Yeah.
Which is really perfect for me.
Yeah.
So it plays to my strengths that we've talked about in the past. 2 weeks ago I was in Sarasota, Florida, at a pretreatment coordinator show. So within the grease community, it's actually the FOG community, fats, oils, and grease. So FOG, fats, oils, and grease, are one of the biggest issues that plumbing systems around the world encounter. The reason for that is fats, oils, and greases, much like your arteries, and is it plaque that builds up?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Will build a layer, and as that hardens, another layer, and another layer, and another layer, and very soon you've got a blockage in your sewer system. And this is not just your home pipes, but your home pipes, this will happen to them, but this is 6 foot in diameter main sewer lines that will get blocked up. So cities will spend millions of dollars a year jetting these lines, hitting them with high pressured water to clear out the grease. Or in some cities like London, a couple years ago had such a big problem, they actually hired and have a full-time crew that goes down into the sewers, into the manholes, and they will stand in floating, they call it greasebergs, because it looks like an iceberg, and they'll break it up and try to push it downstream towards the sorting facility.
Wow.
So it's a big deal. And so
And municipalities are obviously trying to minimize the amount of grease, and so they put some of that burden on the producers of the grease, right? The restaurants and places that are flushing the stuff down the drains.
yeah, so this is a problem that came up in the 80s. Really, the Clean Water Act was enacted to help enforce this, but there's a law of diminishing return on pretreatment, right? So the very first thing that you can do to help make your water clean is you put a filter on it, and that gets a lot of the stuff out of it for very low cost. And these water sewage treatment plants had to keep investing more and more and more as the expectation for the clean water that's being pushed back into rivers and streams to get cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. And there became a point where they were spending so much on getting very minimal increases in quality that they started turning closer to the source, which is restaurants. And so most restaurants in most cities around the U.S. are required to put in grease interceptors or grease traps.
We talked a long time ago when you were at your other job about, what do they call those? Personal sanitation wipes, butt wipes, that have become all the rage here in recent years, and that they say they're flushable. Okay, the fact that they can get out from your plumbing doesn't mean that they're good.
Right.
The wastewater treatment plants, where they combine with grease and other things and become big problems.
Yeah, they'll clog up your house real fast. If you're using those, don't. They do say they're flushable, and you can flush one, but if you're using them and flushing them consistently, it's going to cause a problem. If you have a sewer pump in your house, it's going to clog those up. It's going to cause all sorts of issues.
So it's like a below grade toilet, for example,
right?
Pump.
Right, that's right. And so what we create, our company, are grease interceptors. Traditionally, most places have to put in a 1,000-gallon or larger grease interceptor. It's concrete. They have to dig a big hole in the ground. They put this thing in. It's plumbed in right outside of the restaurant. So everything that goes down the sink in the restaurant goes into this
dishwasher.
Goes into this big 1,000-gallon trap.
It's almost like a septic tank, right?
It's almost exactly like a septic tank. And what happens, and the reason why it works, is that all of the fats, oils, and greases will float to the top. They have a lower specific gravity than water. I learned about that recently. And so they float on top of the water. And then clean water from underneath will come out and be piped out. And the problem with those is, as you run hot water and soapy water down into that system, and the water is fast because there's an elevation difference, that water will create a whirlwind, and that whirlwind will pull. Huh?
Whirlwind? Whirlpool?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
It's not really. It's not wind, but yes, a vortex.
A vortices?
And
Would you say I have a plethora?
of vortices. What it will do is it will pull grease that's already been separated and is floating on top of the water down into the flow of fast moving water and push it out beyond the trap towards the city. And so to keep those from being inefficient, they have to be pumped when they are 25% full of grease. And so what it means is, in order to keep more grease safely, you have to have a bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger unit.
And then you have the maintenance of pumping the stuff out.
All the time, right? Every 3 months. So our company creates 2 products. One that goes right under the sink, which will not only capture the grease, but it has an automatic system for getting the grease into a bucket that the restaurant can just take that bucket and pour it into either their trash, because grease is just food waste, or they can pour it into a grease container.
Or they can mix
like
it
biodiesel
with soapy hot water and then flush it.
Flush it, yes.
Yeah.
A lot of places will do that.
I know they do. It's like the old Steve Martin line about how always take a litter bag in your car. It doesn't take up too much space, and if it ever gets full, you can toss it out the window.
The other product we make replaces that 1,000-gallon trap in a much smaller space. It's designed better. So instead of needing to be pumped at 25% full of grease, ours can go up to 85% full of grease before it needs to be pumped. And it just has a much smarter design that keeps the grease that's been separated out of that flow of that hot and soapy water. All of that said, we end up dealing with people at all levels in this fog prevention. So there are sewer and pretreatment water coordinators, plumbing inspectors in cities that decide if our grease traps can be allowed in that city, or because really we're making an exception to what's on the code book.
Right.
And they're bureaucrats. They don't like to make exceptions because exceptions are risky to their job. And so a lot of what we do is communicating with them to teach them and educate them how ours is a better solution, especially when there's a space issue. So our units do really well in the Northeast because they don't have a lot of space to dig a huge hole and put a 1,000-gallon grease trap.
Sure.
They can put something much smaller in. So then we also deal with engineers and architects who, in designing the plumbing system of a building, will spec out our product to be installed. Then we also deal with wholesalers and resellers and plumbers who have to install our product. And then the end user, the person who owns the restaurant, who either will make the buying decision or ultimately will be the one responsible for maintaining the unit. So the last show in Florida was for pretreatment coordinators, people in Florida who are city officials. And so for them, what they care about is efficiency and how does it deal with solids, how does it deal with emulsification, is it something that they can use as an alternative to what is written in their code book?
Because they're dealing with what comes out of this system.
That's right. What matters most to them is not clogging up the plumbing system, because that's expensive for the city. And so what matters most to them is making sure restaurants are in compliance. So that's what we were dealing with then. It's a much different situation. So this in Phoenix, it's a show for plumbing engineers and architects. There were contractors there as well. So those are people that want to know. They want to know how well is it going to perform for their clients. Is it going to be something that their city, wherever their city was, will accept as an alternative?
Right.
So these are people that are having the same conversations with these officials as we have. And so one of the values we try to add to them is offer. Would it be useful to you if we took up the fight and had the conversations with the city officials so you don't have to? And they would say, well, yes, absolutely. Right?
Why not?
And so it was there's much more of a sales opportunity in this setting. They want to know the specs about the product more than just the will it work as an alternative. So if we had
selling through education or through consulting is so much better for both sides of the sales experience, because again, I'm going to make the decision. You don't need to convince me, and especially through manipulation, right? Just educate me. I'll make the decision. So that's good.
Yep. So we had a big booth. It's a big convention hall.
10 by what?
It's 10 by 30.
Yeah.
10 by 30 booth. It was a fairly big convention hall. We had both of our product lines represented. So we had our newest product will hold 1,826 pounds of grease.
Golly.
Or 248 gallons. And it is about the size of a tall bathtub. So it's so small that it can actually be set inside of a 1,000-gallon grease trap. But I told you, those have to be pumped when they're 25% full of grease. Ours can hold that same almost equivalent of 250 gallons of grease before it needs to be pumped in a much smaller size. And it's 99.2% efficient as far as holding grease. So it doesn't let much grease out at all.
What kind of restaurant is producing that kind of grease? Because I know if you're talking about fry oil.
Chinese buffets.
But like fry oil doesn't get poured down the drain. They use that now. They collect it and sell it to guys that are doing biodiesel and stuff like that.
Well, it depends, yeah.
They shouldn't be pouring it down the drain. Let's put it that way.
It depends. Typically, the places that you would think of as large grease producers have systems in place for managing their grease.
Okay.
So McDonald's, right, they've got to be producing tons of grease. Well, you think they don't have plates that they're washing in their sink.
Right.
So anything that has grease on it that would otherwise be going down the sink goes in the trash.
Well, except for the equipment. So like your fry baskets have to get cleaned out.
That's right.
Here.
But they're not pouring the grease from their fryer down the drain.
Right.
So, and they know how to play the game. They're a big company. They know this. The places that are worst offenders are mom and pops. So because they just don't know, or a lot of ethnic foods. So Chinese buffets are really bad because they're cooking a lot, and every time you wash a dish that has been cooked with grease is getting down.
So Mexican
the
restaurants
drain. And Mexican restaurants as well. They tend to be pretty bad, and it's a situation where, because a lot of those owners are not they're not American by birth, and so there's some cultural difference there.
Sure. Yeah.
They often just don't know some of the codes, may not understand all of the codes, and so there's just a language barrier.
Did you hear about the Krispy Kreme donuts in Littleton, Colorado? Krispy Kreme donuts is what's the name of that street? Can't remember. Anyway, remember we went to that diner, that kind of 50s era diner, went with mom and dad? It was right there next to that, and it's now closed. And part of the reason it closed was they kept getting shut down for maintenance because their grease separators were not doing the job, because they were also washing down the drain at the end of every shift the leftover glaze that they put on the donuts. And it's below grade, so their building was below the sewage lines, so the city had to put in a pump station to pump their water up to the sewage line, and it was getting destroyed and eaten up by stuff.
Right.
And they ended up giving it up because it was they kept getting shut down for that maintenance.
Yeah. So the biggest cause for something like that is they aren't adhering to the pumping schedule. Most cities, and one of the challenges we face is most cities impose a 25% capacity rule or a 90-day rule, whichever happens first. So for our unit, which can hold 85% of its capacity to be the equivalent of a 1,000-gallon trap, if they have to pump it at 25%, it's not good. It's not a good product for that solution. So getting an exception to that pumping schedule is important for us.
Okay, the schedule.
Correct.
The 90 days you're okay with. It's the
It can be.
The capacity is the
Capacity is the bigger issue, but it can be. So we offer really small grease interceptors, and for places, bakeries, coffee shops, places that aren't putting down a lot, but they're required to have it because it's a restaurant. Mm-hmm. So like a Starbucks may be required to have one, even though they're not cooking anything on site.
Yeah.
And so that's they need something. So we have a smaller option for them.
But they're dumping cream and creamers.
Right.
And
So
some things.
They may be, yeah.
And the residue from coffee when you're rinsing out the coffee grounds and all that.
Right. So the bigger issue that coffee shops have are the solids.
Yeah.
Because they get coffee grounds, and not all plumbing systems are designed to do that. So we actually, one of the solutions we have is a solids separator, which is a basin that holds solids as well. For places like that.
I'm assuming if you're still watching this, you're also interested in this.
Yeah.
The rest of you, we'll see you next week.
That's right.
That's interesting, though.
The rest of them have already left. Yeah, it's been.
And we won't see them next week.
It's been really interesting, but walking around the trade show floor was fascinating because I recognized so many of these things that I wouldn't have 2 years ago. Because I've been living in that world, because it was all of these plumbing companies showing off their latest technology, and so I knew the backflow preventers, and I talked to a guy about his angle stop replacement for toilets, and all these different pieces from Moen and Kohler and these big companies, Ferguson, these big companies that I didn't even know their name a couple years ago. I now knew, and so it's. Again, was a surreal moment walking through, realizing this is my life, and I'm very happy with it. I'm very happy where I am right now with what I'm getting to do. But
it's a whole nother world that we just were oblivious to.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, it is funny that when you learn about something new, as a trainer, I get this with people where usually in their first year with our company, they in the early months, they start feeling cocky because all right, they learn about hinges and drawer slides, and I got it. The more you learn, and especially the more you interact with customers and their needs, the more that shines a light on your ignorance.
Right.
The more you then realize, I don't know this.
Yeah.
That's another depth of knowledge I need to pick up. Yeah. It's a lot of fun for me as a trainer, but I see that frustration in people who think they have the world by the tail at the end of their first year, and by the third year, they're starting to get bogged down with details they hadn't even thought about.
Yeah, and I think that's especially going to be true given the wide scope of people we deal with. This, like the end user, the customer who has it installed, I have a pretty good kinship with, I think, already, because honestly, 2 months in, my understanding of a product is higher than most of theirs.
Yeah.
But the city officials who want to know about emulsification testing and who want to know if our products are PDI and UPC approved and what was the ASME testing procedure and all of this other stuff, all of this other stuff. There's so much.
So then it's good that you did those two shows in the order that you did them then, because that allowed you to come into this one having had at least that background from what the municipalities are looking for, right?
Yeah, it is, and I've been making a lot of phone calls, doing a lot of outbound calls, and the two things that were real big takeaways for both of these were pieces of advice I gave to someone who started with the company even more recently than I have. And that was they are people too, and so remembering that even when they ask the really complicated, tricky question, it's okay to say I don't know that. But I know someone that can get that answer for you, and let me help you get that answer, right? And then I heard Orson Scott Card, who wrote Ender's Game, say one time, say one time after a book signing, he was talking about education and encouraging people to pursue their own education, to read books, to go out into the world and learn things. And he said, if you don't know why a subject is interesting, it's because you don't know enough about it yet.
Yeah.
And having that that mentality in situations like that, I think is excellent, because when you go in and they ask a question that you have no idea about, and you turn it back to them and say, I'm actually not sure what you mean by that.
Yeah.
Would you explain? And they explain it, and they're like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
This week that this video is posting, I'm in the middle of a week-long class.
Oh, and congratulations to whoever won the presidential who's-majigger. And sorry for everyone who didn't vote for that person.
Yeah, that's all right. We'll be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking to Smuckers about the separation of powers and how that works and how important it is that we have those separations.
The Avengers.
And that, yeah. And that, when we vote for a president, the president is the figurehead that represents that branch, in this case the executive branch, and that they bring with them a bunch of people that are awfully smart and knowledgeable about their particular segment. You could not expect whoever our new president is to know everything about everything. But, hopefully they're a good manager and are able to properly delegate and at the same time, trust but verify.
Yeah.
And, we'll be okay.
Yeah.
We'll be okay. So, it really is the beauty of our nation.
Yep.
And if they screw up, there's always impeachment or indictment or something.
That's right.
Could happen.
Either one.
So, but this week I'm conducting training with half dozen people from our company, and we're going to be going over a couple days of LED lighting technology, a couple days of sliding door hardware, and this is things like everywhere from sliding in cabinets and furniture. And we have some really interesting hardware that allows on the front of a cabinet. This is your cabinet here. We can have two doors that will bypass each other, but then when they're at rest, they're next to each other. There's no separation. So it's when you go to open it that this pops open and slides past, and then goes back in place. This one pops over. Really, really cool technology, but it can be confusing. And it's confusing for the installer for the first time. It's confusing perhaps in a maintenance issue. Mm-hmm. What things should they watch out for? So I know that a few of the people come into the session are really passionate about sliding door hardware. Also, we're talking architectural sliding. You go to a mall and it's the end of the day and they'll close off their storefronts. Some of them will go with the chains and things like that, but you'll see some restaurants and bars that are inside of a mall or inside of an airport or a hotel where they slide big glass doors, just big panes of glass. We sell the hardware for that. And our customers are, in the first case, cabinet makers and furniture makers. In the second case, they're architectural millworkers. Those are people who make big, giant wooden doors, or they work with glazers who do the big glass doors. So even the folks that'll be coming that are passionate about sliding, they're going to learn about another aspect, either the furniture side or the millwork side. The lighting is interesting to everybody these days. We're also doing some training on locks, both mechanical and electronic access control. That's like at a hospital or a school where maybe your badge contains a transponder that not only says you're allowed in, but can control what hours of the day, what days of the week. Your badge works all the time, but not Christmas at 2 a.m.
Right.
And not only will it deny you access, if that is the case with your credentials, but it also keeps an audit trail, so they know that you
tried to get in it.
Where if you lose a cut key somewhere, you have no idea.
Right.
And who has that key?
Even if you don't lose it.
Yeah.
You make copies of keys.
So that's a fascinating part of this class that we'll be doing this week, and cool. I guarantee you that my students will have some blank spots in their knowledge, and they're going to find that interesting. So anyway, awesome. That's what I'm doing this week.
Cool.
I love my job. Have I mentioned that?
Yeah.
I don't say this in front of many of our people that I have the best job in the company, because really our salespeople have some of the best jobs in the company. They get to go out and hang out with customers and, like I say, problem solve. That's a lot of fun. But I get to equip those people to do that. Yeah. That's a rush. All right, well, why don't we wrap this up?
Yes.
Again, reminder, we need tobacco advent samples, and if you're going to be interested in sending us your least favorite tobacco,
non-setless,
contact either Boy or me. You can contact Boy by private messaging this channel.
Men's Practice Club.
You go to the About page, and there's a place you can click to send a message, or go over to Aristocob and do it, or send me an email at aristocob@gmail. And we'd love to have you to participate, and we'll give you more details about that as we go forward. Again, you can get some free pipes and free or half price shipping during this month of November 2016. Check out the video in the link below that explains that. All right.
That's it. Thank you guys for watching.
Make it a great week. Good
Bye.
to see you again.